Ever get handed one of those massive policy documents, the kind that makes you want to run for the hills, and
Yes.
then told, figure out how to make our data security better? It's like, where do you even begin?
It can feel like being dropped in the middle of the ocean without a life vest.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're tackling today. We're diving into some key parts of NIST SP 853, that super important but kind of overwhelming guide to information security.
Right. It's definitely one of those documents that carries a lot of weight in the cybersecurity world.
So we're going to unpack it all, pull out those golden nuggets of wisdom. And the first thing that really surprised us, I have to say, was NIST's emphasis on plain language. I mean, they actually want these policies and training materials to avoid jargon. Can you believe it?
I know, right? It's like they're speaking our language for once.
It's so refreshing. They actually want people to understand this stuff. Imagine that.
It's a welcome change, especially in a field that's often drowning in technical terms.
Okay, so no more confusing tech speak. What else really jumped out at you from what we read?
Well, something they emphasize over and over is this idea that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution for security.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying you can't just take this document and apply every single rule blindly?
Nope. They really hammer home this point about finding the right balance, security, privacy, usability, and it's about finding the right mix for your specific organization.
So you've really got to tailor your approach.
Exactly. They actually talk about how, security and privacy are kind of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And to get it right, you really need people to work together, collaborate to strike that right balance.
Right, it's got to be effective, but not so locked down that it's impossible to get anything done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this idea of getting things right from the start, that actually leads into another big theme we saw: trust.
Trust. Okay, so how does that play into all of this?
Well, NIST is really big on establishing trust, and that even includes technology itself.
Trusting technology, I like it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
before you let any device or system anywhere near your data, you've got to stop and ask, can I actually trust this thing?
It's like a digital trust fall. Okay, so we're building on this foundation of trust, but how do we actually make sure things stay secure?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. NIST is really, really big on monitoring.
Okay, monitoring, keeping an eye on things. Makes sense.
But what surprised me is how deep they want organizations to go with it. It's not just about knowing who has access to what data, but it's about seeing exactly what they're doing with it every step of the way.
Whoa, okay, so it's not just about having access, it's about how you're using that access.
Exactly. It's almost like having security cameras for your data. Think audit logs, systems that detect unusual activity. They even talk about the importance of programs to address insider threats.
Wow, they are not messing around. It's like they're saying, we're watching you. And I have to admit, when I think about data breaches, I usually picture some kind of external bad guy, hacking their way in.
Yeah, that's a common perception.
But NIST doesn't let us off that easy, do they?
Not at all.
Huh.
They dedicate a good chunk of the document to reminding us that sometimes we can be our own worst enemies.
Oh, no.
Really? Oh, yeah. Lost devices, accidentally sending data to the wrong person, even those invisible electromagnetic signals, you know, the ones that can leak information without anyone realizing it.
Okay, that's a little unnerving. So what you're saying is it's not just about fancy technology, it's about human behavior, too.
Absolutely. We can have the best firewalls, the most advanced intrusion detection systems, but if someone leaves their laptop at a coffee shop,
It's game over.
exactly, we got to remember the human element.
Okay, so speaking of things we might be doing wrong, can we talk about software for a second? Because I am so guilty of just clicking install without a second thought.
You and me both. I think we've all been there.
Right. But from what I'm gathering, NIST would probably say we need to pump the brakes on that habit.
Big time. They want us to treat software like we're inviting someone into our homes.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. I mean, you wouldn't just open your door to anyone without checking their ID first, would you?
So no more blindly trusting every software update or app download.
Definitely not. Think of it more like, vetting a new roommate. You want to be really sure they're not going to empty your bank account or eat all your food, right?
Okay, so instead of blindly hitting install, we need to be more careful about what we're letting onto our systems.
Exactly. And that's where NIST's concept of least functionality comes in. It's kind of like setting boundaries with that new roommate, right? You're essentially giving software the bare minimum access it needs to do its job and nothing more.
Makes sense. So the less software can do, the fewer chances for something to go wrong.
Right, exactly. It's all about minimizing that attack surface, making it harder for the bad guys to find a way in.
So we've covered being careful about what software we install, but what about all the data we share online? It feels like every website wants you to accept a million cookies, and sometimes it feels like you don't really have a choice.
I totally get that feeling too. But here's where NIST really impressed me. They're pushing for a future where users actually understand their privacy choices, where we're not forced into making bad decisions just because we want to, like, read a news article or
It's
whatever.
like finally someone's sticking up for the user. No more illusion of choice.
Exactly. It's about making informed decisions, not just clicking through because we feel like we have to.
Okay, so we've talked about software, we've talked about our own data, but I'm not going to lie, this whole security thing can feel pretty overwhelming sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so many different things to think about, right? It's like, where do you even start?
Exactly. So does NIST offer any advice on, like, how to manage all of this?
They do. And this is where the idea of the digital supply chain comes in.
Okay, the what supply chain? Now you're just using jargon.
Sorry, you're right. It sounds complicated, but it's actually a pretty simple concept. Basically, your data security doesn't just depend on what you do, it also depends on the security practices of all the different companies and developers in your digital world.
Okay, so it's kind of like a chain, and if one link is weak, the whole thing could break down.
You got it. And that's why NIST really emphasizes the importance of vetting everyone in your digital supply chain.
So you're saying we should be just as careful about the companies we trust with our data as we are about, like, checking the ingredients list on our food.
Exactly. Think about it. The software developers you work with, the cloud providers you use, even the companies that make your computer hardware, they all play a role in keeping your data safe.
Wow, okay. I never thought about it that way before, but it makes total sense. It's all connected. So we've covered a lot of high-level stuff, but I'm curious, what are some of the specific things NIST recommends that we can start doing, like today?
You want specifics? I've got some real eye-openers for you. For example, did you know they actually recommend disabling wireless functions like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on your devices when you're not using them?
Wait, seriously? Even on my phone? That seems a little extreme.
Even on your phone. It might seem like a small thing, but every open connection on your device is a potential entry point for attackers.
It's kind of like leaving your front door unlocked, right? You're just making it easier for someone to walk in.
Exactly. Why leave the door open if you don't have to? Okay, ready for another one?
It's me.
Okay, how about this? Imagine being able to track the entire history of a single line of code in a software update. Like you could see every single change that's ever been made.
Whoa, really? Like a history book for your code?
Exactly. That's something NIST is pushing for through something called Developer Configuration Management. It's all about maintaining this really detailed record of how software is built and modified so that no sneaky vulnerabilities slip through.
It's like having a security camera for your code. That's some next level attention to detail.
Right. It really highlights how seriously they take software security. But again, it's not just about the technology itself. NIST is also incredibly big on user training and awareness.
There we go again, back to the human element. I'm sensing a theme here.
It's a big one. And it makes sense, right? I mean, technology can only take us so far. We have to meet it halfway.
Okay, so tell me more about this user training thing. What does NIST have in mind?
Well, they really stress the importance of going beyond those generic security awareness presentations that we've all sat through. The ones that feel like they were written in the Stone Age.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Death by PowerPoint.
They're advocating for training that's actually engaging, that's relevant to people's jobs, and that gives people the knowledge they need to make smart decisions about data security in their day-to-day work.
So, no more one-size-fits-all security lectures.
Hopefully not. Because let's face it, generic training can only take you so far. People need to understand the specific risks in their own work environment, right? And they need to know what to do if they see something suspicious.
It's about empowering people, right? Giving them the knowledge they need to be part of the solution.
Exactly. And it goes even deeper than that. NIST talks about this idea of building a whole culture of cybersecurity where everyone feels comfortable speaking up if they see something that seems off.
Oh, I like that. So it's not just about following the rules, it's about creating an environment where people feel safe to raise concerns.
Right, exactly. It's about fostering that sense of shared responsibility.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. From building trust to monitoring data like hawks, being super picky about our software, understanding those privacy choices we make online, even looking at our digital supply chains. It feels like NIST has really thought of everything.
They haven't missed a beat. And what's so cool is how they've managed to balance those really specific, technical recommendations with those big picture ideas about trust and making sure people are in the loop.
Right. It's not just about like building these digital fortresses around data. It's about making security part of the culture.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so effective. It's a holistic approach.
I'm really struck by how much of this we can actually use, It's not just some theoretical mumbo jumbo. It's full of steps we can actually take to protect ourselves.
100%. Even just thinking back to some of the things we've talked about today, like disabling those wireless connections when we're not using them, being able to track changes in code.
Right. Tailoring that security training, making it actually relevant to people's work.
Exactly. These are all things that can make a real difference.
And for me, I think the biggest takeaway is how much emphasis they put on us, the users. We
Mhm.
have to be in the know, we've got to understand the risks, and we can't be afraid to speak up.
Couldn't agree more. It's a partnership, really.
Yeah.
Technology can only take us so far. We have to do our part too.
Okay, so before we wrap up, you said you had one final thought to leave us with, something about like concealment and misdirection.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's actually a trend they're seeing in cybersecurity, this idea of using concealment and misdirection as a strategy.
Okay, I'm not going to lie, that sounds a little bit like a spy movie.
I know, right? But it's fascinating. It's all about making your valuable data harder for the bad guys to even find in the first place. Like you're trying to camouflage it.
So instead of just building stronger walls, we're making our data blend in. That's a pretty cool concept.
Right. It's a totally different way of thinking about security. And it makes you wonder, how else could this idea of concealment and misdirection play out? Not just in the digital world, but in our everyday lives. Something to think about.
That is a question to ponder. And on that note, if any of our deep divers out there want to explore this fascinating world a little further, and I know I certainly do, I highly recommend checking out NIST SP 800-53R5.
Couldn't agree more. It's a deep dive well worth taking.
And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay secure.